Welcome to Manufacturing Talks with Jim Vinosky. Industry has a million cool stories, and Jim talks to the movers and shakers who are making them happen. Let's dive in.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Manufacturing Talks. I'm Jim Vinosky, your host, and I have a great show for you today. This one I've really been looking forward to. I got Zach Hanson. He is an author, most recently of this book, and clearly about the trades, but in a very different way. So I've had plenty of people on talking about the trade gap and what we need to do to fix it, and kind of the nuts and bolts and the mechanics of the thing. Zach's is much more a personal story about his own effort to learn for himself how to fix things, make things, do things with his hands that he just missed out on being a millennial and coming up when everyone talked about knowledge work being the future and college being everything. And so I'm really looking forward to hearing his whole story. Zach Hanson is with us, and we're going to jump over to him right now. Zach, welcome to my show. Thanks for being here.
Hey, Jim, I appreciate it. I know we kind of went back and forth and we found the time to chat, so I'm super excited to be here.
Well, like your books, this whole meeting here has been its own interesting story. We'll share a little bit of that as we go. I've been dying to talk to you. I mean, I do have to share. So, The Trade Gap is the most recent book, and we're going to focus on that, but you got so much more. And I got one chapter into that book, and I IM'd you and said, this is phenomenal. You got to be in my show. And here we go. So, awesome effort. But before we dive into that, why don't you just give us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, 30,000 foot view of me as Zach. I'm an Idahoan. I live in one of the smallest towns in Idaho, 35 people, no grocery store, no gas station. And it was when I moved to that small town that I started to move away from my white collar lifestyle that I'd been living for the 15 plus years prior of, working for a big tech company, flying all over the place. And ultimately I realized that I wanted more out of life and decided to move to the woods to figure that out while maintaining my tech job. I'll be clear with that. But ultimately I learned a little bit about self-reliance. I grew up very urban. I grew up in a world where it was a call guy era. I grew up in the world of college or bust, anything other than college, especially the trades, was a step in the wrong direction. And I followed that to the T, and somehow still ended up in the middle of nowhere, Idaho, where I started learning skills on the side, little bits of welding, little bits of, electrical work, just learning how to even fall trees for firewood, which ultimately, and I'm sure we'll talk about it a little bit, ended up saving my bacon a little bit later on in life.
Well, and for folks who are interested in that side of the story, I also recommend your other book that I read, Turning Feral, which is much more of that personal story, right?
Yep.
And very funny, I'll share that I got over halfway through The Trade Gap here just in the last week or two before I realized I'd read Turning Feral. So putting two and two together gave me the whole picture. But just getting into the trade gap, I love your approach because I've been covering the skilled trades dilemma here for a long time. Had a lot of people on who are doing practical things about it, who are, much better versed into the details of what has happened and what we need to do to fix it. But yours is still much more a personal story, isn't it?
Yeah, very much so. So I guess you could call it genesis for writing The Trade Gap. Obviously, like you and a lot of people in the broader public, like I think the glimpse that people who are not in the trades every day, like see it through the eyes of like a micro. Somebody who's been like a vocal proponent of saying, hey, we've got a problem, we should be addressing it. And that was my exposure. It was always on the periphery. Like I always knew there was a problem, but it wasn't until on my trajectory in my knowledge working career where I went through a layoff that I finally got exposed to like, oh, there is a big problem here. And it doesn't just affect the, trade side of the world, but all of these knowledge workers who have been working in, I'll call them skilled professions, but skilled professions behind a computer that now are being quickly just inundated or, removed by the advent of artificial intelligence or any other new technology coming in. And then what do you do with a mass amount of people who don't have a hard skill? And that was me. And so it was kind of my story of coming up through that college or bust mentality in the 90s and 2000s to somehow succeeding in a world where I was struggling and then having the rug ripped out from under me. And the only thing that saved me was the luck of the draw of having a few trades or skills to fall back on to pay the bills while I tried to find another job.
Well, what I found interesting was how you kind of had that yearning anyway, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I did. And it was, and you mentioned it, like in Turning Feral, the other book that I wrote, which was my kind of just personal journey of being a knowledge worker, moving out to the middle of nowhere. I had a personal desire to be a little more self-reliant. And that came about through a lot of different avenues that we won't get into. But, I realized when I was like 29 that I didn't know how to really change the oil in my car. I didn't know how to repair the fence when it broke in the backyard. Like I had all the things, but I had no hold or power over when things broke. I had to rely on the plumber when our toilet leaked. I had to rely on the electrician when we had a short. Like all of those things, like I knew nothing about. It was as magical and just a dark tunnel that I had no visibility into. And I was okay with that, unfortunately. But at some point, I started to get this itch. Like I should probably learn some of these things. I can't rely on everybody else for everything in my life. And I need to build some base of understanding.
Right. It's interesting. And I think this is why your book spoke to me so much is I came up kind of the flip side of what you did. I grew up in a little town up in Michigan's Upper Peninsula, remote. My dad worked for the U.S. Forest Service, so we were outside all the time. We cut wood to heat our house. I did home projects. And so I just found it really interesting because I had that growing up. And if anything, I've drifted a bit away from that, but I still do things around the house. But I mean, reading about how you had that hankering and went after it, I think is something that really appealed to me and gave me an appreciation for what I've grown up with.
Yeah, I think it's always the catch-22. I was an adult onset hunter myself. And there's a lot of times I've had conversations with people who are also starting to hunt or trap or do whatever as an adult. And everybody's like, man, I wish I had started when I was young. I wish I'd started when I was young. But similar to what you just mentioned, I think back on things that I was being taught when I was young, and I think it's just natural. But kids kind of push back against whatever is like their norm, right? Like, had I grown up in a hunting family, maybe I would have taken to it and it would have been great and I would have been that much better of a hunter. But knowing myself and like my ability as a young man to just push back against anything my parents were trying to get me to do, frankly, I probably would have been like, yep, I've done it. I've seen it. I hated sitting in the woods cold as a kid and I don't want to do that anymore. Yep. So you never know. It's always like the hindsight 2020 problem. But, for you, and I talked to a lot of people in the book, there are people who did have a similar exposure like you did to chopping wood or doing some manual tasks with their parents. And almost every single one of them hated it at the time, but it somehow paid off for them in the future. And they look back on it like, man, I'm glad I learned that skill. Or man, I'm glad I learned that resilience at a young age.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing you do a great job of in the Trade Gap is you go through the numbers. You talk about the reality of our situation, which is another thing I've tried to do is talk about, we have neither the skills nor the numbers to replace the baby boomers and even now Gen Xers who are going out. The other piece, though, that you really hit on extremely well is kind of this societal success mindset and how you learned that maybe things weren't what had been presented to you. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, oh man. So I was born in the late 80s. I'm 37 now. So I grew up in the 90s, and anybody that was around in the 90s, like, it was hindsight being what it is, a time of excess, I guess, in like the middle class.
Yep.
Yeah, I grew up very middle class, and it was just one of those things where ever since I can remember, maybe even getting into middle school, it was like, you know what? We're on the other end of the .com, or like we're going up into that .com boom era, into the early 2000s. Things seem great. We know that if you just go to college, you're going to come out and make a lot of money. It's like, and it was open that it didn't matter what you got a degree in. It was like, as long as you go to, like, it doesn't matter if it's gender studies or, in my case, political science. It doesn't matter. You will get a great job. And, I don't believe that a lot of this was ill-intentioned, right? I do think there was a time where you could go to college, get a degree, find a job that paid relatively well at the time, holding inflation steady. And that was true. So I don't think a lot of the push in the 90s and 2000s was ill-intended. But I happen to fall in that millennial category where we were coached all the way through every single public education tranche that this was going to be the case. And when I got to high school, when we did have like a local vocational school, or they called it a tech school, that was an option. However, it was preached to all of us that, remember that thing we've been telling you for, the past 10 years, that, if you just go this route, you're going to make a lot more money. And so everybody followed that path. Most everybody, not everybody, but the majority, 60+% followed that path, myself included. And so you go through the motions. I went and I took on debt and went to a public college, got my fancy schmancy political science degree, graduated right when the recession hit. This was like 2008, 2009, when the fallout from the 2007 recession really hit hard. And come to find out, there were no jobs. My little fancy pants, expensive political science degree, no one wanted to understand, Thomas Paine's dissertation on, our economy. No one did.
Right.
Like, there was nobody that wanted to pay me for like the trivia knowledge that I had gained over the last 4 years. And then you look at that across our nation, and then you just have no one who can find jobs. And then I did eventually. And it was for like a quarter of what my mental expectation was of what that pay should be.
Yeah. And that came through loud and clear in the book too. It was like you get the offer and the bottom drops out.
Yep. 100%. So, it was, I call this book, it's like you mentioned, there's a lot of statistics in there. I talk a lot about culturally, like our cognitive dissonance as a country around, is college or bust. I give the reasons why we got there. But really, it's a bit of a cautionary tale. It's like, I am very fortunate that I did end up with a very great career. I still have a career in artificial intelligence, but it came fighting tooth and nail. It came with 6 years of laying on extra debt that I didn't need. And again, hindsight being what it is, could I go back in time and convince high school Zach to go into the trades? Maybe, maybe not. But, where I'm at now, and with the vision of hindsight, like, you can't change what you've done in the past, but you can at least let people who are coming up now know there are alternate routes. And again, I don't want to come across as a college basher. Like, I think it is right for some people. Like, if you know exactly what you want to do, there is clear evidence that getting that credential can help in some instances. I just don't think it should be like this blanket thing put across for everybody, that this is for everyone. Take the debt. It'll be worth it. Because the real answer is it isn't in most cases.
Yep. One other thing I admired about your approach is you weren't afraid to talk about where you feel like you screwed up.
Oh, yeah.
You went to grad school, for example, shared out, layer on more debt, right?
Yeah. And, so Oh, you've read the other book, Turning Feral. I have. One of the things that I promised myself as an adult was that I would be honest. I'd be honest with myself. I would be honest with my family. And these books are a portrayal of that, just in a very public manner. Like
Yeah.
I do not fear exposing where I screwed up. And that's a lot. Like I am, I'm a failure at almost everything. Just to be frank, in some manner or other, I am a failure. And I think a lot of people are afraid to say and expose those things. But in my books, I've decided to be very honest. And like you mentioned, as I've come up, like I talk about cognitive dissonance. For those who don't know what that is, that's when, in the book, I really lay it out. But to make a long story short, think about somebody who goes into a cult, right? For whatever reason, they start to believe this person or thing and they follow it. And then at some point, it's shown that they were lying to you. Most people, from a mental perspective, will double down and be like, make some excuse for that person of why the thing they were believing was wrong for a long time. And they just keep doubling down. That's called cognitive dissonance. It's where you just say, no. I've been told for so long that this is the right thing. Like, even though there is clear evidence that this is false, I'm still going to believe it and double down. That's cognitive dissonance.
Yep.
And that was me through and through with this whole college or bust. So you mentioned the grad school thing. I actually went to 2 grad schools.
Right.
But I got through college, couldn't find work. So, of course it's not me. It's everybody else. They told me this was going to happen. Maybe it's the economy right now. So what should I do? Should I go and maybe find something that actually pays me money? Potentially explore trades? No. I should double down on, the stuff that's been preached to me for 10 years. And I'll just take on more debt, write it out, and get a graduate degree. That'll be the secret sauce. It wasn't. And then I went and got another one. It's just one of those things where as a human, like, everybody thinks they're smarter than other people. And, I did too at the time. But like, again, hindsight, I could look back and be like, man, I was so dense that I couldn't see the forest through the trees. And I was just so hooked into this belief that this education path would unlock so much. And every turn it was proving, like, there was absolute unequivocal proof that doing this was not leading to the big paying job that I had been told it would. But yet I still doubled down. I doubled down and went harder and harder. And again, it did eventually work out for me. And some of that credentialing did help. So I want to be clear with that. But could it have been done differently? Could I have made as much, money as I do today in a different path? Talking to a lot of friends who did go into the trades, like, it seems like I could have. Potentially.
Yeah.
But it's more about showing people you don't have to follow that path per se, or be as dense and egotistical as I was, and learn the hard way. As you know from reading Turning Feral and this, like, I am the guy who has to touch the hot stove more than once before I realize to not do it again.
Yeah, I was going to say, if people want to hear about the things where you screwed up, definitely turn to Turning Feral, because you definitely spare yourself in no regard when it comes to messing up.
Yeah.
Now, another piece of the book. So, here we talk about the need to reach our youth. I cover manufacturing, where we struggle to get workers, and that whole world has been cast in a bad light along with the trades. And so we do need to reach our youth. And I think young people should read both your books, really, all your books. We'll talk about the others here in a minute. But the other thing that comes out in the Trade Gap is it's never too late, right? I mean, you didn't start till you were off on your white collar career and started having this hankering, and you're still working on developing that side. So that's another piece to me, is telling people, it doesn't matter if you're going to make a living at it or not. It's important stuff to know.
100%. And I think, for those listening who haven't read the book, yes, it's my story. It's a cautionary tale. However, I kind of go at it at 2 angles, right? Like, one is I want people who, like, the youth of our nation, to recognize there are more than one paths to go down.
Yeah.
Right. That's one. That's the easy one, right? It's like, hey, take a look. look at the evidence, make an informed decision. If college is for you, that's great. There's nothing wrong with it. If it's not for you, that's also great. And there's no intellectual divide. I think that's the big thing, is like, I have found as much intellectual stimulation in learning some trade skills as I have in some fancy pants Bayesian statistics course at Johns Hopkins. Full stop.
Yep.
But the second one, and I think the more important to me, just because it is me, is showing folks who are either in knowledge working careers or further in whatever career they're in, that you can learn other skills. You can hedge against the change of the job scene today. Like everybody's fears of AI, everybody does this. Like, you are not stuck in whatever career you chose. For me, when I found out that I had lost my job in my white collar AI world back in 2023, I got lucky because I had built some skills. My skills happen to be trapping and some taxidermy. And, I talk a little bit about it, but it took me over 11 months to find another job back in my white collar world, which meant that we burnt through our 6 months of savings. It meant that we were starting to scramble and sell assets to say, like, how do we cover our mortgages?
Yep.
And towards the end, I just said, you know what? I'm going to use the skills I have. And I doubled down on trapping and I doubled down on taxidermy. And I'm very thankful that I had those skills, because it paid our mortgages for 2 months. 2 months. And then I found another job, started clawing my way back, and it was great. But had it not been for those skills that I had acquired, I would have been hosed. We would have had to have sold the house. We would have done a lot of things that we were able to hold off on, thank God, because of skills. So, after that, I decided I was going to get more skills, right? So I went to night welding school here in Idaho and got like a very basic structural welding cert, doing stick welding, intellectually stimulating. It was at night. I could do it after the kids went to bed twice a week for 3 hours. And I got a skill. Similarly, right now I'm on the path to get my electrical journeyman's license, where I'm doing all this schooling, which in Idaho, it's 4 years of like part-time schooling and pretty much full-time apprenticeship. However, I'm spreading out that apprenticeship. So like in a best case scenario, if I keep my day job, I'll have my electrical journeyman's license like 8 years from now, which is fine. The way that I'm looking at these things, and I want people to think about it, is this skill acquisition in some instances can be done part-time. You can work towards your CDL license part-time. You can work towards a welding cert part-time. You can get your FAA drone license part-time. It takes effort and it takes a lot of energy to do it above and beyond whatever your day job is, but it's doable. And it's a hedge. It's a hedge against losing it. And in my mind, in the worst case scenario, if you're a knowledge worker and you're building a skill on the side, you have something to fall back on if you lose your job.
Yep.
But that's the best case scenario.
Right.
And then in the worst case scenario, you have a skill that you can like help out around the house. Like I can now go look at wiring and do different things around the house that I would not have been able to do prior, just from taking like a few semesters of an electrical journeyman's course. Same like I can now weld up a trailer when I inevitably break it at the cabin, because I own a stick welder now and I know the core basics of it and I can do it. So, I think that's the real push and hypothesis of this book, is for these knowledge workers, like skill acquisition is hard, but doable. And no matter your age, you can do it.
Yep. There's a last element you touch on that to me is equally important, even if it never comes up that you have to fall back on those skills for your living, that whole personal satisfaction piece. And you challenged very effectively the concept of time value of money. So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, I'll hold this up and I'm going to hold it a little bit away from the camera, so anybody who actually is a welder can't see my welds. But this is the first piece of metal that I ever welded together.
Oh, cool. Yep.
It's terrible welds. I've gotten a little better since then.
I'll break in here and say I was challenged by your book and talking where you did about welding. I'm a mechanical engineer by degree. I don't know how to weld, and I am going to fix that.
awesome. And that's great. And
Inspired by you. So I'll report back when I've done that.
Well, you can send me a picture of your crappy first welds too.
You got it. I'll post it online too.
But exactly. But in the book, though, like I talk about that satisfaction of doing stuff with your hands. Like I've been at my computer for the last 12 years and I do good work. Like I'm a good worker at whatever I do, but everything that I've built in that world is kind of like this digital dust of stuff that will go away in the ether. Stuff I worked on 10 years ago at IBM doesn't exist anymore. Right. I can't point my child, any of my 3 kids, to say, look what daddy built. But, this stuff, it's there. I've talked to so many people in the trades now. Like you talk to roofers, you ride around with them. Like I did that. Or, I ride around with our highway department and they're like, yeah, I fixed that road when it washed out. Like there are tangible things that are beneficial that it carries a different weight to it. 100%. But, to your point in the book, I talk about time value of money because similar in this, the world that we grew up in, or I grew up in specifically as a millennial, was we were coached around time value of money. It's like, okay, if you're a lawyer and you make $500 an hour, if your toilet leaks, the time value of money would tell you to say, you know what? It is more economical for me to sit on my butt on this couch and hire a plumber to come, no matter the cost, to come and fix it for me. Because if I get up and I do it myself, like I'm technically losing money, right? And everybody's about making money. And that's how we grew up, is time value of money. And I kind of try to flip it on its head, like you mentioned, to the time value of experience. That's kind of what I've coined in this book is how do we get to optimizing on time value of experience? So yes, you might be the lawyer who makes $500 an hour, but there is a benefit, even if you screw it up and still have to call a plumber, to try and fix the problem yourself first. We have so many YouTube videos. Like there's so much information out there that there is a good potential for you to try to solve the problem, say for stuff that is very specialized. Of course, there's always going to be a need for the skilled tradesmen to come in some situations. But a lot of what we face is stuff that could be done on our own. And that's where I kind of argue that people need to drop this time value of money, recognize that it's like a delayed satisfaction, like building these little experience efforts throughout your life on a monthly, on a yearly basis will add up in a better way than just the money you would save by calling someone to come do it for you.
Yep. There's another element, and you and I have traded notes on your friend Michael Easter. I've in other shows recommended his book, The Comfort Crisis, the recommendation that came to me from the one and only Mike Rowe. And that's another piece of it too, is Michael in his book talks about how it's really an essential thing to challenge ourselves and go up against things that are hard and sometimes fail and be uncomfortable. And, you mentioned that in the trade gap as well. So talk a little bit about that piece.
Well, so Michael, I reached out and we were talking and I was like, I'm kind of lifting. So for those who don't know, in the Comfort Crisis, Michael challenges everybody to do uncomfortable things, right? It's like we've gotten too comfortable in America on all fronts. His book has resonated as a New York Times bestseller. He's had other books come out after that are New York Times bestseller that are in a similar vein. But his idea is you should do a misogi. A misogi being like a Japanese term for a challenge. And his idea is once a year, you should challenge yourself to something that will make you physically uncomfortable. And like the rules are like it should carry a 50% chance that you fail. And the only other rule is like you can't die, right? Like that's it. So that could be maybe for someone a 10K foot race, or it could be climbing Mount Everest. Like it depends on where you're at in your scale of ability, of course, but it should be for you challenging. So in the trade gap, I kind of propose a similar thing. I tee it up with his book, but saying that we should be doing these little monthly misogis of, challenges to ourselves from a skill acquisition point. Toilet leaks, you know what? Go to Home Depot, buy the toilet repair kit and try it. It doesn't have to take tons of hours, but like maybe 4 hours worth of work. For me, when I was younger, it would have been changing the oil in my car. Instead of going through the drive-through thing, go through, understand the mechanics of the vehicle a little bit, enough to change the oil in my own car. It could be anything. It could be knitting. My scope of trades is very wide. But then similarly, every year you should do something even more challenging. It could be building deck furniture. It could be welding together a smoker if that's what you're into. It could be getting that CDL license and doing a trucking route or trapping or whatever it is you want to do that is a little bit of a bigger, longer project, but something that you can physically hold, something that you can physically reflect on and walk by every day, year after year, and see the result of your hard work.
Yep. I couldn't agree more. We've talked about other people's books. We should talk about your other books. We've covered Turning Feral a good bit, but you got a few others out there as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, I actually consider writing now a trade. It's one of those things like where you can fall back and you can make money on it. So that is a trade of mine, and I enjoy it.
Well, and to your point, something tangible you'll leave.
Yeah, exactly. It's a physical book that I can go and show my kids, which is a lot of fun. So yeah, I have Turning Feral, which is the book kind of just on my genesis story of leaving the white collar world and moving in the middle of nowhere and acquiring skills. Of course, the Trade Gap is more of this, observation or cultural observation, if you will, of where we're at now and how we might change that. But I do have other books. I have 3 other books, actually. One is called The Art of Being Artificially Intelligent. That was my first book. I wouldn't buy it if I were you. You look back and reflect on where you start and how you kind of evolve as a writer. It's a little tiny book, but it was a lot of fun to write. It was my first foray into publishing. But then I have 2 fiction books, actually, all on Idaho history. It's called The Bone Scraper. It's a 2-book series. There's a 3rd one on the way eventually, but it kind of is historical fiction based on where we were at in Idaho. So it covers in the 1860s true time history with a fictional character based on my great-grandfather in Atlanta, Idaho. And then in the 2nd book, he heads down to the Owahis in southern Idaho and has a whole experience there in Silver City. But it's kind of, I would describe it as Quentin Tarantino meets Louis L'Amour. So it's a somewhat violent historical Western, if you will.
Yeah, and I have not read those yet, but as a history buff myself, I promise you, Zach, I will be getting those and reading them in the near future.
Cool.
Any last thoughts before we wrap up?
I don't think so. I would obviously encourage everybody to pick up the Trade Gap. I'm very passionate, just given my recent experience. And, if you have young kids, if you have high schoolers that are curious on the path from college or trades, get them the book. If nothing else, it'll be a good cautionary tale to maybe help them think critically. If you yourself are a knowledge worker and are worried about the future and the downdraw on potential jobs based on AI, grab the book. Maybe it'll inspire you to learn some skills on the side too. But that's all I've got, Jim.
Well, and for the manufacturing audience here, a lot of us have come up from the floor and gone into management and gotten away from the floor. So a great challenge there is to get back on the floor, do those jobs, learn how, or remind yourself how challenging and sometimes even impossible they are. So the misogi is definitely something we should all be going after per Zach's recommendation every month.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jim. It was great chatting with you, and this was an absolute blast.
Same here. Thank you for the signed copy, which, that's one benefit is
maybe that'll be worth it.
So I very much appreciate it, and just been a really great pleasure to talk to you, and I look forward to seeing what you do in the future.
Perfect. Thanks, Jim.
Thank you, Zach. Well, that was just great fun. I had very high expectations for Zach's appearance here on Manufacturing Talks, and he knocked it out of the park. That was one of my best shows ever, in my humble opinion, thanks to Zach. It's going to be tough to beat that, but we are going to do our best, and I think we got a great shot at it with our guest next week. That is Russ Bukowski. He's the president of Mastercam. If you've never heard of them, boy, oh boy, company that's helping drive manufacturing forward, CAD CAM company from way back. unique in offering software solutions for both the machinist and the engineer. Big into training, so it's going to be a bunch of fun to talk to Russ and hear his take on everything from, again, solving the trades crisis to reshoring to everything that we talk about here on Manufacturing Talks. As always, hey, thanks to you guys in the audience. You're why we're here. So be here next Tuesday with Russ, and every Tuesday after that, we'll have a show for you. In the meantime, this is Jim Vinoski signing off from Manufacturing Talks. See ya.
Thanks for tuning in to Manufacturing Talks with Jim Vinoski. Watch for new episodes dropping every Tuesday. And don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe.